Marvel Spider-Man 2 has a bunch of different suits, each with their own backstories and connections, some even completely original to the game. But today, we are going to be specifically looking at the Arachknight, which, if you couldn't tell by the design, is a mixture between Spider-Man and MoonKnight. Now, Arachknight hails from a Marvel event back in 2018 called Infinity Warps, which saw multiple characters in the Marvel Universe combined into one, creating a whole new character with a whole new backstory and abilities. So let's get into his origin. Now, funnily enough, I feel a lot of inspiration from Batman during this origin of Arachknight, which people like to compare him and MoonKnight anyway. So his origin picks up one night where we see Peter as a child with Uncle Ben and Aunt May leaving a natural history museum. And after leaving the museum pretty late, instead of getting a cab, they decide to take a shortcut through the forest, and in which Peter, being the energetic little kid he is, takes off running, getting a head start. And unfortunately for him, that one night changed everything, as we see Peter coming to a halting stop as he's confronted with a giant green hairy beast known as the Goblin, as he chomps down on his neck, biting him, pitting two huge fangs down his jugular. And as he's on the floor bleeding out and calling for Uncle Ben jumps from behind trying to tackle the Goblin, but he is unfortunately no match. And as the Goblin uses his superhuman strength, one-handedly grabs and chokes Uncle Ben, twisting his head the other way. And Aunt May, doing anything she can to protect Peter on the ground, who's still alive at this point, jumps in between them. But unfortunately for her as well, there was nothing she could do, as the Goblin just swipes at her, sending her flying away. Now Peter, who is still on the ground, looks over and sees Ben's body. And as his vision slowly starts to go black and blood loss starts to creep in, a spider out of nowhere crawls on his face and speaks to him, saying, "Let me save you, child. Let me turn this around. Awaken into a totem, a spider. You are one of us now," as it bites him on the cheek, infusing him with some kind of power. And as it turns out, the spider's venom connected him to an ancient bloodline. It not only healed his wounds, but filled him with unspeakable power and saved him that night, but not without drawbacks, as it also shattered his mind, not only from the traumatic event that just occurred, but from the spider totem's power. We see the police arrive at the crack of dawn in the ambulance picking up the bodies, and after the detectives questioning Peter and him giving his testimony of everything that occurred that evening, they wrote him off as crazy after saying it was some kind of goblin beast that did it. But now young Peter now has multiple voices in his head, 3 more plus his own, different personalities or aspects that will forever change the direction of his life. We then pick up 15 years later as we see the Arachknight in full glory. Now a little bit about the personalities Peter now has. Along with his own conscious mind, he has a more violent and intense one that they call the Knight, who is stronger and more cutthroat versus the others. He has a more nerdy, smarter one, which is a scientist. And he also has a more business-minded one, or the CEO, in which he uses to run Parker Industries with his assistant Mary Jane, and his best friend Harry, who's in on the superhero gig, who helps him develop tech and move around. But now moving over to powers and abilities. Even though Arachknight's history is relatively short, only lasting 2 issues and then showing up in other books here and there, he has all the normal abilities of Spider-Man: his super strength, his agility, his wall climbing, spider sense, etc. But as mentioned before, he also has the different personalities, each with their own fields of expertise. This Arachknight also uses gadgets, such as his Arach darts, which are basically like batarangs or moonarangs from MoonKnight. It also isn't stated, but his suit was either powered by magic or somehow imbued by the spider that bit him, but he seems to be able to call his suit from anywhere, at any time, and it appears around him like MoonKnight does from the show, or even like nanotech, such as Iron Man's suit. Other than that, we see some one-off gadgets or stuff he's been tinkering with. Like it seems in this universe, he invented the Goblin glider as a throwaway prototype. Now moving on to some notable moments. In this universe, the Goblin is of course Norman Osborn, but it seems to be a curse that, kind of like a werewolf, he turns in at night and goes out on a spree and is unable to control himself. But it turns out his best friend Harry knew about this and knew what happened to his parents. And later on in the issues, we even see Norman bite Harry, transferring the curse onto him, turning him into the new Goblin. Which is also interesting because at the beginning of the series, we saw that Goblin also bit Peter. So if the spider didn't get to him, maybe he would have been this universe's next Goblin. But who knows? Anyways, that's just a little bit about the Arachknight. What do you think? Is he cool? Do you play with his suit in Spider-Man 2? Would you like to see more of him? Since from my knowledge, he hasn't been used that much since the miniseries, Infinity Warps. Anyways, thanks for watching. Leave a like and stay tuned for more.